Welcome back. It is always a good day when I wake up, give thanks, and then I realize that today is a day that it is my privilege to be able to interview and introduce you to another remarkable human being. I just want to do a quick little housekeeping. Oh my gosh, India came on board, the Philippines, UK, New Zealand, Australia. I don't know what to say to you guys. I just absolutely love you. You have forged ahead. You are my second largest amount of downloads as far as a country goes. So thank you. Ireland, Italy, Canada, of course, your number three, and where I'm broadcasting from, the United States is obviously my number one market. I'm very grateful. Thank you for the book sales. I appreciate all of the follows on Facebook. The page has been growing in leaps and bounds. And I just really appreciate to have this space where we can talk about something that is arguably one of the more uncomfortable topics on the planet, and that is death. I believe death is dinner conversation. I think once we strip it down and we get right to it, it makes us live a lot deeper and with a lot more meaning when you realize that your breaths are numbered. So, with that being said, I'm going to introduce you to a super cool dude. He is a radio brethren, 25 years of sports radio. His name is Jeff Dotseth. Jeff Dotseth is part of a huge, wildly popular show. It's called the Dave and Jeff Show.com. I'll put the link below. 25 years of sports broadcasting, college football Saturdays on Fox Sports Radio, loves to do charity work, which we're going to talk about because he's very involved with suicide prevention, which I'm a huge fan of. So let's get to it. Welcome to the next room, Jeff. I am very pleased that you're here with me today.
Hey, Jane, thanks for having me. And I loved hearing where your show goes. I spend a lot of time in Toronto, so I love Canada. But I think, like you, started in radio. Talk radio is what I wanted to do. I grew up in San Diego. I grew up listening to local stations in town. And then having a buddy of mine tell me in high school, what's your career path? I said, I don't know. He said, I think you should think about radio. And he might as well have told me be an astronaut. I thought I had zero chance at it. But thankfully, I found myself in the right spot. I'm sure you would say the same thing. There's so many different, signposts in the path of your life that take you in a separate direction. And I ended up in radio here in San Diego, was lucky enough to do it, as you mentioned, for 25 years. But now, Dave and I, we've worked together since day one. We do this podcast and we have an absolute blast. And it started off in San Diego. The football team had left. The San Diego Chargers had left.
Yes.
And Dave and I had left radio. But what was kind of funny is 7 or 8 different years throughout our 20 years, we were doing San Diego Chargers pre and post game shows. What nobody really knew was Dave and I are diehard Raider fans. So we were doing
Oh,
Charger. Hey,
Jeff,
man,
we
it's
can't be friends anymore.
Dave, we will be friends because it was theater of the mind, and we would find connections with players, and it would allow us to cheer for that team, of course, unless they were playing the Raiders. But we left the radio. We were very comfortable leaving. We were ready for new people to come in and take their time. And then the Chargers left San Diego. We had covered that story every day. We had covered it from the Chargers' perspective. We had covered it from the NFL's perspective. But as Raider fans, we felt like we were able to cover it in the middle. We didn't have a bias. We were not attached to the Chargers. We were not attached to the NFL. And we saw this narrative starting to come out that just wasn't the truth. So we started going in our podcast and we would tell, look, guys, this is what happened. This happened, that happened. And that was kind of fun. We did one. And then we came back and we did radio stories. We did stories about things that happen that get out over the air. I ran a board for a San Diego icon by the name of Ken Kramer. Jane, I was the worst board up in history. And so we tell stories about how cuss words would get out. And poor Ken would say, Jeff, did you get that? And I go, and then it had gotten out over the air. And so we did radio stories. But then things changed. And what happened was January 1st, 2018, Dave and I had been together New Year's Eve. December 31st, 2017, we were excited. The podcasts were starting to grow again. It was pretty fun. And we said, man, this 2018 is going to be a really, really fun year. January 1st, Dave calls me mid-afternoon and says, hey, man, I just have to let you know my father took his own life last night.
Ugh.
And I said, that's really funny you called because I just found out I'm getting a divorce. And our whole show, Jane, in that moment changed. When Dave's father passed away, they had a lot of unfinished business. There was no clean bow. There's rough edges to this day. And he went on and we did a podcast. He talked for about 45 minutes about the loss of a parent when there's things that have not been settled.
Mm.
At the time of my divorce, starting in 2018, I have twin boys. And at that time, they were 10 years old. And there was a point in February of that year when it was the first time I had to drop my son off. My son, Cade, was 10. He and his brother, Jack, are my two best friends. And I said to him, we'd gone to a movie, we'd seen Black Panther, and I just knew I could feel the clock ticking in my head, like this is going to be a terrible day. And so I said to Cade, listen, when I drop you off, let's just make this quick because it's not going to be easy for me. And Jane, as I dropped him off and I pulled away a broken man, I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw my 10-year-old son fold at the waist and start crying. I was devastated. I'd never been through anything like it. And I went on the air. We did a podcast the day after that. And look, I'm a wise ass. We tell jokes, we have fun. And I went on and I said, look, man, I'm shattered. I feel like I let my son down. I feel like I let myself down. And it's the beauty of the podcast and what you just said about the people that are out there and are so beautiful in their support of us. We kind of come together as this little community. I bet you would feel the same, Jane. We may be the ones leading it, but we go down this path together. The next day after that show, I didn't know left from right. And I got up and I had 67 direct messages in my Twitter.
Wow.
I would say probably 40 of those were from people that candidly I really didn't like. We disagreed on sports, we disagreed on everything. But they wrote me these messages and they said, Jeff, don't quit. Don't quit. I don't have a relationship with my father. When you talk about your sons, I lived through it. We got you. We'll build you back up. And slowly, I started to find my way. But it kind of why we're here. In June of 2018, I still had no legs below me. I still didn't believe in myself. I had kind of lost my direction. I had kind of lost my self-confidence. And my dad introduced me to a woman named Erica Lee. And Erica came into my life in June of 2018. She was born in 1985. 1985, Jane, was the start of my senior year in high school. And when I tell her story, I always tell people this. For whatever reason, as a guy in my 50s, I never looked at women in their 20s or in their 30s. To me, my perfect day would be if Angie Dickinson at age 92 returned my call. So when I met Erica at that time, I wasn't looking for anything romantic. She's a stunningly beautiful woman. She just came into my life at a time when I desperately needed it. And I heard John Mulaney, the comedian, doing a great interview with David Letterman. It's on Netflix right now. And he was talking about a conversation that he had with Lorne Michaels. And Lorne Michaels was talking about John Belushi. And he said, you know, I knew John Belushi 7 years, but I've talked about him for 45. Erica was literally in my life for 6 months. 6 months. Yet I talk about her on a regular basis and have for the past 6 years. And
Hmm.
in this business, Jane, we're so fortunate. Man, I had Channing Tatum in my studio. I had Joe Rogan in my studio. I've had Cheech and Chong, Richard Lewis, Paul Rogers from Bad Company, and dozens of athletes. All of them I was fascinated by. I can't think of anybody I've had a conversation with that impacted me more than she did.
Wow.
And and yeah, we'll tell her story and how she's still with me. And look, I miss her every day, but her presence is felt every day, and it makes me incredibly happy.
Let me circle back to when you dropped Kate off at school and you're
At
just
my house, at my
right. Yeah,
condo.
right. You dropped him off and you're broken, right?
Yeah.
Getting a divorce. And here you have to see this young man just crumble. Um, but then what you did is you turned around and you bared your soul.
Yeah.
And I have found that when we do this, it helps us grow. You know, we're instead of stuffing it down and pretending like this horrific thing didn't happen to you, you're like, wow, you know, this occurred and I'm going to talk about it. And fortunately, you have a podcast to be able to do that. And I love that people reached out to you. So let's talk about Erica because
Mhm.
this show we do a lot about grief. I've had a lot of good shows on suicide, and also one of my very favorite topics is afterlife. Um,
Mhm.
it's cool if you don't buy it or you don't believe in it, but
Sure.
most of the people that are tuned in to the next room are wide open to receive it because they know that it's really I just feel love never dies. We just go on and on and on and on. And I do believe that there is the next room available to all of us. We go back to source, in my opinion. So tell me the story of Erica and how a woman that you only knew for 6 months, who was much younger than you,
Yeah.
how did you, what do you feel? What did you just feel like it was just this manifestation of this relationship that had to be?
Yeah, it was crazy. The funniest thing is my dad is a very, very low-key guy and very fun. My dad sent me a message and he said, "Hey, I want you to call Erica Lee." And I said, "Okay." And as mentioned, I wasn't really in a great frame of mind. About 2 days go by and I get a call back from my dad, and it was the only time in our entire relationship where he wasn't mad, but he was like, "Hey, what are you waiting on?" I was like, "What?" And he's like, "I told you to call Erica. What are you waiting on?" And I laughed because it's so uncharacteristic of him. He's such a sweet guy. I said, "Okay, okay." So I'm in Carlsbad. She came and we met at this restaurant here, and she pulls up in a black Porsche, and she's this statuesque woman of Chinese descent. And she comes out, and the hair and the makeup is perfect, and the dress is perfect. And I thought, okay, right. I probably do what a lot of people do. I stereotyped. I thought she's going to be ego. I think I'm probably not going to like her. Jane, it couldn't have been further. She came in, she knew my background, and she said, "Jeff, my commitment is to kids and to sports and going into the inner city and finding opportunities for these kids, and you can help me. I know you can help me." So when you don't really believe in yourself and somebody that you meet within 5 minutes comes in and starts telling you that they believe in you, and she had this quick laugh. She was like a kid. But Jane, without question, it's not hyperbole. I've never seen a faster mind in my life as she just talked and thought things out and jotted notes. And so she developed this group called Rarity Partners. And Rarity Partners was going to, like I said, be involved with the junior NBA, the junior PGA, inner city, and she quickly established a board of directors. And she sends me a PowerPoint. She said, "Look, here's our board." And on the front page, it was her, president. Page two was me. But then behind me, Jane, was an executive vice president at ESPN, Behind him was a VP of marketing for the Yankees. Two other people below that were board of directors for high end companies. And I called her and I said, like, what is this? What? And I said, how am I page two? I'm like, I should be like page 32. And I said, is this like, are you catfishing me? Because I said, I'm going to find myself walking the beach with a metal detector. And she's laughing. And she goes, no, you're exactly where you belong on page two. Jane, 2 days later, an Amazon package shows up and it's a metal detector. And the note said, thank you for the laugh. You're not going anywhere. And I still have it. And so we would talk 4 to 5 times a day. And there were these conference calls with the guys from ESPN, with the guys from Yes Network, with people from inner city development for young kids, with the junior NBA. And each time on these calls, she continued to introduce me at a level that I had not felt in a long time. And she believed in me. Um, she called me. I remember it was August of 2018. This is 6 weeks after I've met her. And I'm at my job. She calls me at 10 o'clock in the morning and she says, what are you doing? So, well, I'm at work. She goes, hey, can you get to LA? She said, I'm signing a lease. We're going to rent the 25th floor of the Wilshire Grand. And she said, we're doing a walkthrough. And she said, we're going to build offices. But she said, Jeff, I'm going to build a podcast studio because what you're doing is very, very important. Like the next day, Dave and I had a party for our 20th anniversary of our show. We had it at East Lake Country Club in San Diego. We're raising money for the groups that you were nice enough to mention: Rancho Coastal Humane Society, the Alpha Project, which helped the homeless down here, and suicide prevention in respect to Dave's father. She came down and I think she spent $3,000 that night. And one of the highlights of the night was she had a very long discussion with Che Hernandez, who's the local director of suicide prevention, and said, we want to be a part of it. We want to be a part. And this is August of 2018. Um, so yeah, she just got involved and was wonderful and slowly started to build me back up. I mentioned that in at the start, I go to Toronto a lot for work. November of 2018, and this all kind of loops into how she's still with me. November 11th, 2018, I'm in downtown Toronto. It's the first night I've been down. I don't know how to dress, right? I've been out of the winter for a long time. And I come out of a car and I'm going into a dinner and it is bitter Canadian cold. My phone rings and it's Erica. And she says, hey, I've got a development on the business plan. Do you have a chance to talk? And I said, I'm running into dinner. Can I call you back? Because I know she's 3 hours behind me. And Jane, as brilliant as she was, as funny as she had this very mischievous little kid side to her. And I will never forget it as I'm standing directly outside of Scotiabank Arena. She says to me, going to dinner, male or female? And I'm like, what? And she goes, who you having dinner with, male or female? And I said, female. And she said, like a little kid, ooh, ooh. And I said, I will call you back. I'm done with you. She's giggling the whole time. So as I get back to California, every conversation about anything we're going to do business wise, she would say, look, I think we will be in Florida if that doesn't interfere with your wedding in Toronto. I said, no, I will find a way to schedule it. December of 2018, just a month later, everything changes. And it changed because the people that she got involved with that were helping with the financing of the project, that were going to be the money behind it, unfortunately, were stealing money.
Oh,
And they were stealing money and they stole a substantial amount of money from Erica's parents.
oh boy.
And I saw everything in my beautiful friend change. Her dynamic changed, her body language changed, her self-confidence changed, all of it. And I was feeling myself coming up while watching her go down.
Mm,
And I think any of us that have been through it, and I say it all the time, when suicide becomes part of your life, as it has for me, the first thing I knew was there is no white knight syndrome. I could not have ridden in on my stallion and saved the day. But the thing that was very, very important to me was being there for a level that tried to be in the same way that she was for me. In February of 2019, I met with her in Los Angeles. I met with her at a place called Seventh and Fig, and we had lunch. And her whole body language, like I said, Jane, her dynamic changed. And the thing that I said to her at that point was, I said, just do me a favor, don't quit on me. I said, you're going to be a great comeback story. Don't quit on me. I mentioned earlier we had talked 4 to 5 times a day on a regular basis. As we got to February, it probably changed to like 2 or 3. But it was more at that point, unfortunately, no longer about kids and community and doing all the things. It was just trying to keep her in the game because she was feeling this enormous sense of guilt, and I was concerned about her. March 19th, I called her, and it's the first time ever in that very brief relationship that my call went to voicemail. And I was terrified. And I left her about a minute and a half message, and I just told her I loved her and that we were going to come out of this. And the next day, I get a text message, and it's from her mother. And her mother said, "Hey, Jeff, I just wanted to let you know we lost Erica today." And so, what had happened on that day, because I see things and look, I'm respectful to everybody, but you can't change something by putting it on a Facebook screen for 10 minutes. You can't cut and paste it. And just what people during the day, her aunt and her cousin were insanely concerned about her. Erica said that she was going to go to a therapy session. Her aunt and her cousin called her and begged her to let them attend the therapy session. This is probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 20th of March. She says, "No, I'm fine." She says, "I'm going to come to your house tonight for dinner." Instead, what she did, Jane, was she parked her car at a restaurant in downtown LA, the same Porsche that she had driven up when I met her, 6 months earlier. She left a note in there, and the note said, "Please don't tow the car. The battery is dead." Because she's Chinese and she's polite and she's the sweetest person in the world, she had yoga pants on. In her yoga pants, she put her driver's license, she put her Kaiser card, and she put $100 bills because if she was not successful in what she was planning to do, the $100 bill would have covered her deductible. It was a 7-minute walk that I have done more times than I care to remember. And she walked in, and I mentioned at the start, she's this statuesque, beautiful woman. She walks directly through a homeless encampment. And at 7 o'clock on March the 20th, Erica Lee climbed over the wall and jumped to her death on the 101 freeway in Los Angeles. And I will say, as I mentioned with Cade, it devastated me at a level that to this day it's impossible to describe because the love that you have for your son, your kids, it's unconditional. You can't explain it, especially when your kids are your best friends. But when you have somebody come into your life, and we said it, Jane, you meet so many people in radio and you know everything. But this person comes in and absolutely changes everything for you, like you didn't feel like it. And I said to a friend last week, I said, she didn't just take a pill and go to sleep. She jumped into live traffic, and we don't, I'm just telling you, because we're candid in this topic. When you deal with something like that, Junior Seau was a friend. Junior Seau committed suicide. When you think about things like that, it's very, very hard. But I didn't have the relationship at the end with Junior that I had with Erica. And all of a sudden, when you felt like, hey, we're going, I'm getting back on track. And not only do you feel like you're back at square one, but you feel like the entire house you were in was built of glass and people have come through with rocks and hammers, man. It's incredibly hard. And so many of our audience had met her at that event. She's in the pictures from that event. They were all, who is this? And it was the same thing, Jane. I went back on and explained it, devastated, broken again. And again, the podcast audience slowly started to put me back together.
Mm,
And I'm grateful forever because if I didn't have them, I candidly, I don't know where I am today.
wow. Couple things. Death
Yeah,
by suicide is just, it's really difficult to understand. I don't know anyone that I've had on the show can even put it into language that we understand.
I agree.
It's just a really, really dark, hard topic. Um, a couple things. Erica heard you when you left her that big, long minute and a half message.
Yeah,
She heard you 100%. And I think that certain people come into our lives and it's just this energy connection. We're meant to be with them. We're meant to have these relationships that are completely don't make sense on paper, but are unexplainable. Um, and your dad knew, you know,
yeah,
your
yeah.
dad, what's your dad's name?
Paul.
Paul? All
Yeah,
right. Paul knew that you absolutely were going to be shifted by Erica. This human being was going to help you shift. And so here she lifts you up, puts you on a path, and you get your confidence back. And then she leaves.
yeah,
Talk to me about how you've connected with her since her death by suicide.
yeah. There's a person that comes into this story that's incredibly important, and her name is Joe Carlo. And Joe Carlo is a friend of mine in Toronto. 48 hours after Erica's death, I'm at the bridge. I'm at the bridge where she jumped, and people know I'm there. And look, I can't give myself a shot. I'm not going to do anything. My friends know I'm not going to do anything to hurt myself, but it's just emotionally at a different level. And I'm sitting there.
Why did you go there?
I had to go there to just. It's a great question, Jane. I look back at that, and I just think it's one of those things where everything's just swarming. I had to feel it. I had to walk it. I had to know it, and I felt like that was the place at the start where I probably had to tell her goodbye
Okay.
or just tell her I was there, but I had to be there. And so I saw where the car was. I made the walk. Ironically, my dad was with me, but I asked him to just let me do my thing and he walked away. So there was a gentleman I mentioned, it was a homeless encampment. And I wanted to make sure that I was in the right place to pay respects and send love to my friend. And Jane, this gentleman was there in his tent and he's clearly had better days. And I said, were you here 2 nights ago? And he said, yeah. And I said, somebody really close to me took their life. And I said, I'm just trying to confirm I'm in the right spot. And he said, you are. But he said, that's all the information I can provide. Because he said, once I found out what happened, he said, I went back in my tent out of love and respect to your friend.
Oh,
I didn't want to be somebody to disrespect her. And
wow.
it was pretty cool. So there's a bench in front of this bridge. And I was sitting there and I mentioned my friend Joe in Toronto, and she's texting me, and my phone's blowing up and different things. But in those situations, you just kind of want to hear from certain people. And Joe and I have a great friendship. And she said, "Hey, where are you?" And I said, "I'm here." And I said, she was the trainer for the Oshawa Generals hockey team. They were in the midst of a game. She's texting me from behind the bench while the Oshawa Generals are playing, checking in on me. I mean, Jane, when you have friends at that level, man, it's pretty special.
You hang on to
And
them.
you hang on to them, and
Yep.
you remind them every day that you value them. And
Good for
Joe's,
Joe.
yeah, and she's a huge part of this story. And so, we kind of started putting it together there. But where it all changed was her birthday. And I wrote this down. I was trying to think. It was October 5th, 2020. She had passed away in March of 2019. But October 5th, 2020, Erica's buried at Forest Lawn. She's not far from Paul Walker. And she would like that celebrities are there. Matthew Perry's not far from her. And she would have liked all that. But on her birthday, I was just really, really struggling. I was struggling. I was at her grave. And once again, who pops in but Joe Carlo? And Joe texts me from Toronto and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm here and it's a very, very bad day." Now, look, I think for myself, I may just say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. If you need me, I'll be here. You got this," and probably check out. Not who Joe Carlo is. What she did was she said, "We're going to do an exercise." And she said, "If Erica was here, what was the plan for tonight?" And really, Jane, I had nothing to lose. So I said, "Okay." I said, "We go to dinner." Joe said, "Where are you going to go?" And I said, "We're going to go to Dan Tana's." Dan Tana's is this iconic place in Hollywood.
It's
And
incredible.
she would have loved it. She was a foodie. She loved desserts, but she would have just had this very fun. I remember the one time I was there, Lou Wasserman was there with these monster glasses. And I was like, man, this is great. Um,
All kinds of
and
celebrities hang out there.
right,
It's iconic. It's just such a
right.
cool old school Hollywood hangout.
Yeah.
Love that place.
And one story about Erica when she was alive, I had said to her, she almost met Joe because I said she was very big on promoting women in sports. And I said, "Hey, the Hockey Hall of Fame is going to do this event where they're hosting a handful of women journalists and talking about women in hockey." And she said, "Have you offered to MC the event?" I said, "Well, no." She said, "Well, how come?" I said, "Well, they have people from TSN and Canadian Sports or ESPN." "Well, I think you should call them." And I said, "It doesn't really work where I just randomly call from California." But that's who she was. And so this Toronto connection was always there. So Joe and I did this for about 10 minutes and I kind of started feeling myself coming out of it. And the way it ended was Joe said, "Where are you now?" And I said, "We're at a club." "Who's there?" I said, "Well, it's me, it's Erica, it's Erica's cousin Pam, Pam's husband Gary." Joe says, "That's great." She said, "What song is playing on the sound system?" And I say this, Jane, because I kind of knew this song. I had seen it performed on the MTV Awards, but it was not on a Spotify playlist. It wasn't anything that front and center. It just popped in my head at that moment because I thought it was something that Erica would like. And the song was Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. And we finished, and you just kind of feel a little like, okay. And I said to Joe, "I really appreciate you doing that." I said, "I just kind of feel like, you can get up, you can start walking." That was October of 2020. Cinco de Mayo 2021, just about 3 years ago in a few days, I was driving home from my podcast. As I was driving home, there was a guy in a Ford Bronco in front of me that hits a couch cushion, does a 180 turn, and comes back and hits me directly head on at 80 miles an hour. He's in a Ford Bronco, the old AJ or OJ Al Collins. I'm in a Nissan Sentra, which is a tin can. This guy hits me at 80 miles an hour head on. I had two different first responders say, "Who's in that Sentra?" I said, "It was me." They said, "Dude, you should be dead." They said, "Are you going to the hospital?" I said, "Yes, my ex-wife is on the way to pick me up." Second guy comes by, says the same thing. He says, "Dude, I don't know how you're walking out of here, but somebody's looking out for you." Jane, we get in the car. My ex-wife starts the car. The song changes and Blinding Lights comes on. And I start laughing. And
Mm.
I'm like, wow, that's pretty wild.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. We fast forward to March 15th of 2022, and I find myself back in Toronto. And I find myself in the spot where the famous phone call, ooh, took place. I'm a huge hockey fan. I wanted to get in and see the Toronto Maple Leafs play, the hottest ticket in Toronto. And I've looked for 3 days. Tickets are $300. You can't get in. But I find myself down in that area and I jump onto a ticket site on my phone and I find one ticket, $75. So I buy it. I'm like, I don't know where I am. I go into the building. I start walking around. It's the first time I've ever been in that arena. And I'm noticing, like, okay, I'm not behind the goal and I'm kind of coming up. And I said to this usher, I said, "Hey, man, where's this seat?" He goes, "Brother, you're right there." And Jane, I sit down. It's another cold night in Toronto. And I am looking directly at center ice. Within 30 seconds, the lights go down, strobes start, and Blinding Lights comes on. I
Mm.
come home, and the guy who had this office where I'm sitting, and I work for Upper Deck, had been here 25 years, incredibly close friend of mine. He tells me, he says, "Hey, man, I'm leaving. I got a new opportunity, and you're the guy. You're the guy. Congratulations. Here's this. Here's a financial increase that's going to be very important to you. And most importantly, we love you here and we're so glad you're here. Something you don't hear in radio." And he goes, "Listen, man, it's a pretty exciting day." He goes, "Take the rest of the day, get out. Congratulations." Said, "I can leave knowing that I'm turning the job over to you." Incredibly exciting day. I get directly outside my car where, like, I'm looking right where I was. I go out, I start my car. The car, again, within 35 seconds, the song changes. It's the radio. It's not Spotify. It's not a playlist. Uh, and Blinding Lights comes on. March of that year, a couple of weeks, March 20th was the anniversary of her death. I go up and I'm sitting on the hillside again. And I'm sitting there and it's a cold, cold, windy day, but I'm just sitting there and I'm kind of reflecting on everything and how different it's been and everything else. And in the Chinese culture, ladybugs are very big. They're your guardian angel. And on this cold, windy, overcast day, I look down and a ladybug lands on my knee and drops right in the nook of my jeans and sat there for 15 minutes. Look, at a certain point, in my opinion, things stop being coincidence, right? I'm sure there's viable excuses for everything. So after visiting at her grave for a little bit, I went back. I went back to the bridge because I wanted to go back to the bridge and kind of have a little bit of a different mindset. And it was still a difficult walk because at the end of the walk, there's a Starbucks, and she and I met at Starbucks 1,000 different times. And again, while you fight that hero, you can't be a hero. It's impossible to not think, man, if she would have just gone there, would have been here in a minute. Jane, I'm sitting on the bench and I'm kind of reflecting and soaking it all in and just remembering and missing my friend, when out of nowhere, I look to my right, and what appears to be a homeless woman has sat down next to me. She says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so I shared. I said, "This is the spot where a friend of mine a couple of years ago took her life." And I said, "I'm just here talking to her. I miss her. I love her. I'm just reminding her she matters." And this woman and I chatted for a few minutes. And I said, "Hey, I'm Jeff." And she shared her name. And man, I wish I remembered it, but I don't. And she goes, "So do you live here?" I said, "No, I live in San Diego." And she said, "Okay." She said, "Thanks for sharing your story. We'll take care of Erica when you're not here." I said, "That means the world." Jane, I got up and I crossed the street and I turned back to wave goodbye. She was gone. There was nowhere. She was a little woman. She was not a track star. She was gone. And I said, "Whoa, that's pretty cool." And then, just most recently, I was there like I said, I was in Toronto last week or at the end of April. And I went to dinner with Joe. And I was just saying, it's always funny in this city where it all comes back. It comes back to where it was and everything else. And we talked about the meaning of giving that song to me as a gift. I said, it's a gift that I'll never, ever be able to repay. And on the podcast, I've said to people, look, if you're missing somebody and you're looking for that connection, Erica would love you to take Blinding Lights. And if you hear it, it means she's thinking about you, and those you miss are thinking about you as well. While I was there, an iconic or sports voice, guy by the name of Bob Cole, passed away at the age of 90. Any of our friends in Canada are like, we know who Bob Cole is. He was a guy very, very influential when I was a kid getting into sports broadcasting. I loved him. And Bob had passed away a couple of weeks ago at the age of 90. He wrote a book that I had never picked up. And I set a goal for myself to buy that book so I would have it for my flight home back to San Diego. So I get up Monday morning in Toronto, and there's a store up there called Indigo, which is their big bookstore chain. And I'm looking online, there's probably 25 stores in the Metro Toronto area. There's only one that has it, one copy in all of Toronto. So I call and I ask them to hold the book. I take a look, it says it's like 11 kilometers. I'm like, oh, that's probably what, 5 minutes away. I get in, it's a $32 Uber ride. I go, what the hell am I doing? Spending $32 in an Uber ride to buy a book that I could get tomorrow on Amazon, but screw it, I'm going to go. So I go to this store, Jane, and I walk in, and there's a very sweet woman working behind the counter. I said, hey, my name's Jeff. I called about that book. She says, Jeff, I got it for you. Here you go. Man, isn't it tragic? We lost Bob Cole. I said, yeah, meant a lot to me. I said, hey, I'm going to look around the store. Jane, I took the book. I walked about 17 paces down the hall. You know the rest. Song changes and Blinding Lights comes on.
Mm.
And I went back and I told the woman, I said, look, something really special just happened and I'm going to share it with you. And she started to tear up. And she said, Jeff, when my mom died, the last song that I heard was I Will Remember You by Sarah McLachlan. But she said, you know what? I've never told anybody because I was afraid they'd laugh at me or they'd think I was nuts. And she started crying and she said, I thank you for telling me that. And
Mm.
she said, I'll think about Erica. She goes, that song's on a loop. We hear it here a lot. And she said, I'll never hear it the same way again.
That's
And so that's what
awesome.
I came home and I texted my friend Jane Asher. I said, Jane, I think I got to tell you this story. And yeah, I'm incredibly thankful to my friend Joe Carlo and who made it happen because yeah, I've had friends pass away and man, they may be here checking in on me right now. And I'm so clueless. I have no idea.
Right.
But Joe
Oh,
made it very, very clear when Erica shows up. And I'll just share this too, and then whatever you got. I was sharing this with my sister. My sister is one of my best friends. She's 5 years older than me. My grandmother passed away in 2004. And my sister was there when my grandmother passed. She said she felt the energy leave the room, birds fluttering, right? All these wild things. And she said all of a sudden, for a couple of weeks, she was seeing ladybugs everywhere, ladybugs here, ladybugs there. And she said one day she was at the airport, and it was kind of, she was dropping off a friend, and she opens the trunk and there's a ladybug. And she said to me, I said, "Hey, I know it's you. I see you. I acknowledge you. I got you." And she said, "You know what? I never saw a ladybug again." And so the one thing that I'm very, very aware of is if that song comes on, I tell her I love her. I tell her I miss her. I thank her for checking in on me. I thank her for taking care of me and Kate and Jack, my boys. I ask her to overlook on Joe Carlo, who made it all happen. And I try to be respectful to her coming in so that she'll continue to do it. And to this point, she still does.
Yeah, this is good. I'm very grateful that you would just open up and share. And I
Yeah.
just really, it's an important story. And it's what I tell people all the time is just talk to them. I have it on good authority that they hear every word we speak.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, it really
Pretty
is.
cool.
So here's to Erica Lee. Here's to your friend Joe, Guardian Angels, Ladybugs, Dantanas, Manifestation, Blinding Lights,
Right.
and in the Dave and Jeff Show.com, right?
Yeah.
What a great show. We're gonna have to go because I've got some stuff going on here in the house that I
Yeah.
told you about before we went on. But you can come back on.
Anytime, Jen.
Yeah, because I really appreciate when men open up. And you're not afraid. You're not afraid
No.
to put yourself out there and bare your soul. So thank you so
Hey,
much. I
Jay,
really
can I just
appreciate it.
close with one quick thing?
Yes, you may.
I, I had a friend last week that was thinking about taking their own life.
Oh boy.
Reached out to me while I was in Toronto, this person very close to me, in tears, and said I couldn't be another Erica.
Oh,
And said, knowing Erica's story, knowing the impact that it's made. So I would just encourage anybody, man, if you're fighting it and you're struggling, reach out. Don't be scared, male or female. There is no, it does not take away your masculinity. It does not emasculate you. For a woman, it's no sign of weakness. If you're fighting the fight, reach out to somebody who believes in you, reach out to somebody who loves you and helps you keep fighting the fight. We get it, and we'll be there for you forever.
beautiful. Those are great words. I will put the link for the Alpha Project, Rancho Coastal Humane Society, good people over there, and
Yeah.
also the phone number and information for suicide prevention, because this is a very, very important show. And I appreciate you so much for sharing Erica's story. She's with you. She's with you right
Yeah.
now. She's like, right on. You just did a whole show on the next room about me. Thank you. It's really very special. DaveandJeffShow.com. Please follow the guy, especially if you're a sports fan. I'm going to turn my son on if he doesn't already know about you. He is a huge Chargers fan because he was born here.
Well, Dave does a Chargers podcast, so we cover
Oh,
all angles now.
okay.
So we
All
got him
right.
covered.
Well, and I am a diehard Lions fan because I was born and raised in Detroit.
Nice.
So, well,
Nice.
not raised in Detroit, but born, yeah, a couple hours out of Detroit, little town called
Yeah.
Rancho. So I
Like it.
love my Lions, and we were like
So close, Jane.
almost there. It
Good
was so
good days
exciting to
coming.
see the state of Michigan just buzzing.
Yes.
So
Loved it.
thank you very much for being here on The Next Room. It is where death is dinner conversation. And like Jeff just so eloquently put, reach out, check on people. And my final thought is if you can be anything on the planet, please be kind. Thanks again for tuning in to The Next Room with Jane Asher. I appreciate it. Thanks again, Jeff.
You're welcome, Jane.